Slater Crusaders, welcome back. What an honor to talk to Professor Alan Dershowitz, professor of law, of course, at Harvard University, author of a book I often recommend. You hear us talk about it a lot, The Case for Israel. But his newest book is Guilt by Association, the challenge of proving innocence in the age of Me Too. Professor, it's an honor, sir. How are you today?
Well, thank you. But the name of the book is Guilt by Accusation.
Oh my gosh, what did I say? Guilt by innocence?
But it's okay because it makes the point that I want to make. Namely, today, if you're accused, you're guilty. And, you can get the book now for $1.98 on Kindle. So please read it, because if it could happen to me, it could happen to your son, it could happen to your nephew, it could happen to your brother.
Now, obviously, there's something noble about Me Too, right? There's goodness in it.
Sure.
But what have you seen as abuses of the whole movement?
Well, it was Eric Hoffer, the philosopher, who once said, every cause starts as a movement, then it becomes a business, and ultimately a racket. And we're seeing that some unscrupulous lawyers and some women who are willing to lie for money are exploiting the Me Too movement and falsely accusing people. In my case, I never met this woman, period. I never had sex with anybody but my wife during the relevant time period. She, under pressure from her lawyers, as her best friend told me, simply made it up to get money. The plot was very simple. Accuse Dershowitz in public, got a lot of attention and publicity. He can't sue you because you're accusing him in court papers. Then quietly go to Leslie Wexner, a billionaire, and say, by the way, the same woman who is accusing Dershowitz is accusing you of having sex with him 7 or 8 times, unprotected, and making her wear Victoria's Secret type lingerie. If you don't want to have happen to you what happened to Dershowitz, there are ways of resolving it. According to this woman's best friend, they were expecting $1 billion from Leslie Wexner to protect his company. It was clearly a plan, in the words of Leslie Wexner's own lawyer and wife, a shakedown, and I was the stalking horse. I've proved my innocence conclusively. I have emails from this woman admitting she never met me. I have an email from her publicist saying, we know you never met Dershowitz, but put him in the book. It will help you sell the book. She then puts me in her manuscript as someone she did not have sex with. She then tells the FBI she didn't have sex with me. She tells her best friend she didn't have sex with me. She tells everybody. Then she meets her lawyers. Suddenly she remembers having sex with me 7 times, including in a car in front of my house with 2 women, then going into my house where my wife, who is a psychologist, has a professional office, where my daughter, who was like 7 or 8 years old, had a nanny, and where we have security cameras. The whole thing is made up. The FBI former director did an investigation and concluded there was no truth to it at all. And yet you ask the typical person on the street, and they'll say, oh, of course, if she made an accusation, it must be true. So I'm fighting back against the abuses of Me Too. Me Too is a good movement when it's used against actual perpetrators by actual victims. But here, I'm the victim. I'm the victim of subornation of perjury. I'm the victim of extortion. I'm a victim of false testimony. And I'm fighting back. People say you shouldn't write the book because if you didn't write the book, the story will go away, but you're bringing more attention to it. I want to bring more attention to it. Victims should speak out. And I'm a victim, and we have to deal with this problem.
Very good. You mentioned money in your circumstance. What would you say are some other motivations that women would ever have to make a false accusation? Because we heard this a lot with like Blasey Ford, right? She makes her accusation and everyone's like, well, why would she lie? As if that's an argument. But it happens a lot. So why would a woman lie?
There are many, many reasons. Remember, in most cases, when a woman accuses a man, there was sex. The question is it consensual or not? Or they knew each other. They worked at the workplace. In my case, mine is the only mutual case in which the accuser never met the accused. But in most cases, it's a bad relationship. Something went wrong. The woman regrets having sex. She's pressured by her friends to make an accusation. Sometimes it's mistaken identities. Now, I don't want to put a woman who has made a mistake in jail, or a woman who's accused somebody who had sex with her and she doesn't believe there was consent. That's a reasonable mistake. But when a woman sits down with her lawyers and plots to make up a story for money, that woman should go to prison and her lawyer should be disbarred.
Yeah. As we're watching your case and others, just in the court of public opinion, like, what lens should we filter what we're hearing through, right? Because we all have this knee jerk, or we're being told to believe all women, but also innocent until proven guilty. So how do you recommend we, the people, look at things like your case?
Well, I think you always look at the facts, look at the evidence. If somebody makes an accusation, you ask, what's the proof? And then you ask the person who's accused, what evidence do you have that you didn't do it? In my case, the media has just not published the overwhelming evidence I have of my innocence. And they also haven't published the fact that the woman who accused me has a long history of lying. She falsely accused Tipper Gore, Al Gore, Bill Clinton. She lied about her age. She said she was 14 when she met Jeffrey Epstein. She was 17 when she met Jeffrey Epstein. So let the media and the public look at these issues on both sides and then decide. Look, read my book, $1.98 on Kindle. It's an hour and a half read. And then if you still think I'm guilty, well, you won't. I mean, when you read the book, you'll see the evidence is overwhelming that this woman made it up. And there'll be a trial because now, to tell you how bad it's gotten, I deny that I do it. And she accuses me of a defamation and sues me for defamation. So here's the way it works. She could accuse me of anything in the world as long as she does it in court papers, and I can't sue her. But as soon as I deny it to the media, she can sue me for defamation. Well, I've countersued her. We have 2 lawsuits. We'll have a trial. I will call Leslie Wexner as a witness, David Boies, her lawyer, as a witness. Of course, I'll call her as a witness and confront her with all of her previous lies. And then the jury and the judge will decide and the public will decide. I'm convinced completely that they'll see the truth.
But you're so right. It's no matter what you do, you're going to be in trouble because here you are. I can see the accusations now. You're using your power as a powerful man to go against women. And here you are attacking the integrity of this woman and therefore all women. So like what should a normal person who maybe doesn't have as much power as you do, what should one do when falsely accused?
Well, first of all, I used to tell my students, don't get yourself into a position where you could ever be falsely accused. So in my case, I never flirt. I never touch. I'm not Al Franken. I don't go to bars. I have been totally faithful to my wife since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein, the worst day in my life, having met him. And nonetheless, I get falsely accused. Then I have all the evidence in the world, and I still am not believed. So the tragedy is under existing law and practices, there isn't very much you can do. You know, when you send your son off to college, you tell him, of course, no sex while drinking. You tell him, of course, just make sure that there's consent on all sides. You tell him all that, but it's not going to help if you get a calculating woman and sleazy lawyers who sit down and say, let's figure out how to make money off the Me Too movement. So we have to change the law. We have to make sure that people who make false accusations behind the cover of the litigation privilege in court aren't exempt from being sued. We have to make sure that women who are caught lying, making up the whole story, are prosecuted and sent to prison. You know, even the 10 Commandments prohibits thou shalt not bear false witness. And the punishment for bearing false witness in the Bible was you get the same punishment that the person who you falsely accused would have gotten. But today, I have proved that the false accuser in my case made up the story. Prosecutors aren't interested in looking at it. I've invited the FBI to investigate me and her and indict one of us for perjury. And I know who it will be. It will be her, of course, not me. But the FBI doesn't seem to be interested. The U.S. attorney, I went to the U.S. attorney. They weren't interested. I went to the district attorney of Manhattan. They weren't interested. They're only interested in prosecuting men who are falsely accused by women, because otherwise you're perceived as being opposed to the Me Too movement.